If you're wondering where I've been the past few weeks, I've been busy playing the new Spider-Man Miles Morales game. I beat the game, I beat it to 100%, and now I'm working on the Platinum Trophy in New Game Plus. And yes, this is my very first game review, so let me know what you think. Fair warning, this is my full review for the new Miles Morales Spider-Man game. There will be major spoilers for the story, bosses, twists, and everything in between. I am not holding anything back. This review will be split into sections and topics, but before I begin, I'm just gonna get this one thing out of the way. I'm only bringing this up because I made a video about it when it was first announced. Peter's face looks fine in the game. The main reason why it looked weird is because it was basically a deep fake in the first trailer. They've since improved on it, and when we look at it in the new Miles Morales game, it looks perfectly fine. Everybody's tired of hearing about it at this point, so let's just move on to the first section. The main issue with having such well-known characters is it's hard to pull off a twist. The first Spider-Man game got around this by acknowledging the fact that Otto would turn to the dark side, but humanized him enough to the point that we were hoping he wouldn't. And then when he eventually did, it had an effect on us. Miles Morales doesn't really have this effect, but at least it doesn't hold the Prowler and Tinkerer plot twists over our heads for a very long time, because they are, in fact, very obvious twists. And I want to let you know that is perfectly fine. Not every form of media needs to have a super big twist at the end, and living up to the Otto-Peter dynamic is a very difficult task, but between the Prowler and the Tinkerer, this game gets pretty dang close. But that ending though, it was like something out of the Raimi films. The villain saves the hero and sacrifices themselves. The civilians who Spidey protected pay that love forward and protect his identity. It caught me way off guard and I loved it. I don't think it could have been more perfect. They added so much love and care into this story and even took out some of the bad things. The fans, they did not like the stealth in the first game when you weren't Spider-Man, so they took that away in this game. It really seems like the game designers listened to what the fans wanted and then they actually delivered. The only thing I wasn't super happy about was the actual length of the game. We all knew this game was going to be shorter from the get-go, but it just went by in a flash for me, which of course is understandable. It was a less expensive game, so it couldn't have had everything the OG had. But on the bright side, there were plenty to do post-main story, which brings me to my next section, side missions. One of my big issues with the first game is the lack of variety in side missions post-story, but this game really delivers on that front full force. Sure, you get the things you're used to, your run-of-the-mill robberies and break-ins, but thanks to the Friendly Neighborhood app, we get plenty of unique missions, which means you're never bored while protecting the city. We even get a return of Howard's Pigeons, which I just adore. I was also very worried about the lack of history Miles would have in this game. The backpacks were one of my favorite storytelling elements from the first game, and they were filled with fun references to the comics and shows. But since Miles has only been Spider-Man for about a year now in this game, I didn't expect them to do anything like that. But they got around it by introducing the time capsules. Sure, they were a lot less fan servicey, but they really did help establish that these characters had been in New York their whole lives, and they were really fun to collect. Even though I played this game on the PS4 Pro, it looked very good. The animation and cutscenes had a few issues on my version, but that's to be expected with an older console. They really did take a page out of the Arkham series book and keeps the city looking fresh by placing the story around Christmas time. This powders and freezes every street and building in New York with ice and snow. That plus the addition of Harlem, and the map feels brand spanking new. I will be the first to admit I wasn't super impressed with the suit selection in this game. Sure, they definitely had some bangers, and a lot were Insomniac originals, which I loved, but they were still missing a few ones I had high on my wish list. Yet, I really can't fault this game due to the fact that Miles doesn't have 300 different suits to choose from like Peter, and they do need to save some suits for DLC or sequels. Although, I was right in my prediction that they'd overuse the hoodie trope popularized by the Spider-Verse film, but that's okay though, it's pretty iconic at this point. My personal favorite suit had to be the end suit. Using it made me feel like a more seasoned, experienced Miles who's been a web slinger for decades now. And I bought the comic book. All of the voice acting from the first game was of course brilliant.
That wasn't me. You said you'd never abandon me. You promised. Remember?
And I'm so excited to say that the voice acting in this game really holds up. Sure, it took me a minute to warm up to Najee Jeter's, I hope I'm saying that right, voice at first, but after I did, I really loved it. Just once you get past the tutorial, his voice is phenomenal. A lot of the small stuff really builds up with the voice acting. Like for instance, he's out of breath like constantly compared to Peter when he was really only out of breath every once in a while when talking. This is of course because Miles is still a very fresh Spider-Man, and Peter, well, he's no spring chicken. And of course, since the main point of the story is that Peter's not actually in New York at the moment, Yuri Lowenthal, one of the best voice actors of frickin' all time, doesn't get as much screen time as he normally should. But they make up for this by having Peter pre-record messages for Miles at training sites. And sure, Peter's voice in these scenes is a little bit too video game tutorial-esque, if that makes sense, but hey, as long as it means Yuri keeps his job, I'm all for it. And now for the final section of the game, the combat. I gotta say, the standard combat difficulty of this game is the perfect level for a gamer like me. I died, a healthy amount of times without ever really getting stuck too bad. And due to the realistic fact that if you get shot in this game basically twice, you're practically dead already. It forces you to be quick on your feet and as resourceful as possible. The venom blasts and attacks in this game are so fresh. They're so satisfying to pull off, look visually interesting, and really feel like they pack a punch. They're honestly my favorite part of the combat, although I do still really appreciate how they improved the suit mods. Basically, they got rid of suit powers, which I didn't really mind because there were so many new ways to take down enemies anyways. And instead of suit powers, they replaced them with suit mods and visor mods. You can have 2 mods of each type activated at a time, and they give you little edges in battle, like increase your armor and recharge your venom faster. And then when it comes to enemies, you have a pretty good variety of those guys too. Sure, the Roxxon guys were basically just red-painted Sable goons, which was a bit of a shame, but over the course of the game they develop counters to your Venom Blast and Visibility, which keeps them interesting since they have your exact weaknesses to your special powers that you've come to rely on. My only big complaint about the combat is the gadget system. You only get 4 in the game, which would be fine if they were ones I'd actually be using. I don't need a bunch of holographic teammates. A simple impact web or trip mine would have done nicely. And finally, overall, if the first Spider-Man game was a 9 out of 10, this game would easily meet that standard. It fixes a lot of the issues I had with the original while improving the combat and the feel of the game altogether. Sure, Miles Morales has its own issues and the story is significantly weaker, but I think that it just about levels out with the original. And seeing how the original is my favorite game of all time, that's high praise. Phenomenal job, Insomniac. I would recommend this game to basically anyone.